Well, g'day. HMR here. I'm sitting here typing in a couple things to people there and didn't even realize it was time. I'm like, how much time is left before this thing starts? And it goes, like, no, you should have started it already. Oh, well. I hope the sound is okay. Can somebody let me know if the sound's okay? Because I've been monkeying around with settings and stuff. So that would be important to know. Oh, it sounds pretty clear where I checked it, so I hope it is. I think I'm finally mastering OBS a little bit more. Oh, hey there, Deborah. So can somebody just verify for me that sound is good? I think it is good. By golly, by gosh. What an accident. Okay. Well, let's start with this, shall we? So, borderline personality. Trying to love borderline? It's impossible. Futility. Right? Right? Who knows what other people think? I'm a bit muffled. Oh, no. Hey there, everybody. Anybody else got an opinion on the sound? Muffled isn't good. That doesn't make sense. Oh, Lord. I'm a bit muffled. Oh, no. Okay, well, at my end, it sounds like when I listen briefly on a phone that I'm coming through loudly and clearly. So I don't really know. Anyway, you can let me know. But so I just wanted to start off by saying, so this title, something I really want to talk about. The sound is, what's that mean? HIOF. Oh, good. Thank you. Because I'm just getting used to this OBS setting, and I'm using a mic, and I want to make sure I don't have double sound and everything like that. So interestingly enough, I'd like to just start off by saying that, you know, I've been posting some of my videos to some of my Facebook pages where I don't really show up at all over there, but like posting videos. So I just got this comment. I just checked email a few minutes ago, and a person on one of my Facebook pages just put, "You're so biased." I'm like, I love comments like that. Well, you know, they're probably taking every word I say as if it means every single person everywhere, and that's not true, right? No monolithic group. Not everybody with BPD is the same. Not all codependents are the same. Not everybody in the middle is the same. You know, that kind of thing. So the thing is that with this, I was just going to say, why do I use this title, right? Trying to love a borderline, impossibly futile, or impossible futility. Well, take a look at the picture, because that's kind of what it's like for more people than not, right? Till people get significant treatment, I can't say unless and until a certain amount. It's really hard to tell because people are individual. But for the majority of people with BPD, they're going to need a lot of years of treatment. And to get pretty close to almost recovered to really be able to have a healthy, mutual, reciprocal adult relationship. So, thanks for that, Wheels. So I think the thing is this, right? Trying to love a borderline or a person with BPD. Well, you know something? I just want to start off this little psychological reality here called trying is nice, right? Trying is a word. Trying has a meaning, but more to the philosophical sense, not literal, you know, wordplay here. But trying isn't doing, and trying isn't accomplishing. And I thought, what better way to put it? Because you can try to love that person with BPD. But are you really ever going to get there? Are you getting there? So many people don't get there. They get heartbroken. They get used up. They get exhausted. They are just beyond themselves, lost themselves. Why? Well, I'm not here to rag all over people with BPD. Not at all. They're not all the same. But I'm here to say they have, through no fault of their own in childhood, right? Incredible needs. Incredible neediness. They don't know who they are. They don't know how to soothe themselves because they don't know what self would they soothe. How do you do that? They don't know how to comfort themselves. They don't often know what they need. They don't have communication skills. A lot of borderline behavior is driven by zero capacity to actually express what they do need, because maybe they don't know. So, but with all of this, I'm not trying to say so people with BPD, all of them are the same, or they're all horrible. This happens, right? It's the response to the adverse childhood experience. But, hey, when people get to be adults, that unfair reality of, like, it's time to do something about it, time to get into therapy, time to learn how to meet your own needs and grieve and find yourself and all kinds of things. So, but, even people online with BPD will say, if somebody asks about their needs, they'll say, well, my needs are immense. That's what we're talking about here. Immense needs, not like we all have needs. And actually, most of us don't have BPD. It depends where you are on a scale of codependency. Some people with codependence aren't meeting their needs very well either, for different reasons. But those of us that are sort of averagely mentally healthy, well, we have needs. And I know, as an averagely mentally healthy person, I can't always meet my needs the second I'd like to. It depends what the need is, right? But then I have the ability to tolerate, that not having a certain need met if it involves something else, or if it, or I just don't have time to get to something I wanted to do, around the apartment or for myself or whatever the heck. But so people with BPD have immense needs. And often, they're so busy defending themselves against those really horrible experiences, in most people's case, in childhood. They're so busy defending against the ghosts of childhood that are right in the here and now dissociatively with, the emotional dysregulation and dissociation, and sometimes age regression, not always. Nor is that age regression always like to 2 years of age, as I'm going to keep repeating here, for the factual sake of it. So people with BPD, a majority of those, and especially untreated, don't know how to express, or in any emotionally intelligent or mature way, they don't know how to ask for what they do need. And then the other thing that's happening subconsciously for them is that they just subsume you, essentially, because they're trying to seek identity through you. And so you become that object other I've always talked about, right? Excuse me, parental object other. Whether that's idealized good mom, or mom never had, or devalued, wounding parent, that's who you become in these relationships, or often in friendship, and if you're in the favorite person role, which really nobody ever should be, because lots of people don't realize what that's about. So they don't know how to ask for their needs. They don't even often know what their needs are. So they can go through tons of manipulative, conflict generating, or withdrawal in the quiet borderline's case. Tons of drama and chaos because they're trying to get you to figure something out because they think, well, they don't think, but they act as if it's a magical thinking, right, too, but they act as if you're supposed to read their mind. And you can't read their mind. You can't know what's going on with them. And so another thing about this neediness is learned helplessness and codependency along with BPD. And boy, am I sounding biased here? Well, I'm not biased, but I think that comment on Facebook is funny. I'll have to figure out a nice, funny reply for later or something. So these people are basically really lost and wanting their needs met through others, by others, and not realizing that often. But this leads to a lot of the self-absorption that you see in BPD. And a lot of the self-absorption, by the way, I'm going to say this gently here. I got much more coming on BPD, the idea of BPD, comorbid NPD, how it's really overblown online, and what is it really. And the stats are all over the place, so I don't really know what's accurate. I've seen it as low as 16%. I've seen it as high as 42%. I don't know if anybody knows what they're talking about with these stats. I don't know. But the thing is, so narcissism, yes, the third rail, when talking about borderline personality, because narcissism is within, to a certain degree, within BPD. So when you see something self-absorbed and all take, and me about the person with BPD, doesn't mean they're necessarily a narcissist, doesn't mean they're necessarily comorbid or anything like that. BPD is an intrapsychic narcissistic injury. Same definition that's clinically given to NPD. There are differences, of course, and there are a few overlaps. But everybody with BPD, every time they're self-absorbed or all about themselves or think they're better than you in overcompensatory ways, doesn't mean they're narcissists all of a sudden. And so most people with BPD, but then again, I have to refer back to, I like this reference, to Dr. Fox, the licensed psychologist video YouTuber guy, when he said, and I really didn't like the videos at first, he's coining the term, he has coined it, complex borderline personality. Well, okay, but really, I think it's in the pseudoscience of psychiatry area. However, in the information he did give for whatever his research is and whatever line of thinking and ideology that he's following, known as, quote, the pseudoscience of psychiatry perhaps, he did say that 93% of people with BPD today, these days, unlike when I had it way back, it was different, have complex, what he calls complex BPD. What does he mean by that? Well, BPD with either another comorbid personality disorder, and a lot of that's a little bit bunk nonsense, but they keep adding them on and etc. And then also it would mean 93% of people, according to Dr. Fox, these are not my stats, I don't know where he got his, I should look back at the video, see if there's something I could read there, a reference. He said, so for people with BPD who have comorbidity, other personality disorders, and or co-occurring other disorders, 93% today. That's what he says based on what I don't know. And again, it would still be pseudoscience and unproven scientific fact. It's still ideology. But then he says 7% of people have what's known as pure BPD. I find those numbers to sound rather skewed. I don't know, because that's what I had to the degree that I had it. I'm going to have to talk about that somewhere online to make it make sense. But it was pure BPD. It wasn't this occurring thing and that co-occurring thing. And I didn't have any comorbid diagnoses at all. And today it's really hard for somebody to get a diagnosis, I think, of just BPD. I don't know what that's about. I won't go on a, soapbox journey of what that's about. So, figuring out what a person with BPD needs for a person with BPD is, to many, maddening, to many, so frustrating, they can't tolerate it. They have no ability to internalize emotions, in the acting out, and the quiet borderline that internalizes emotions, well, it's not exactly their emotional process they're internalizing because they don't know who they are. So when a person with BPD gets frustrated or pissed or aggravated, happy or anguished, or even curious, envious, they feel like, or many have described and clients have described to me, I'm terrible at reading people. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I need. I don't know what they want. And these immense needs of people with BPD get in the way, along with the object-other relating, what that means, the splitting cycles, etc., the adverse childhood experience that's created all this, that they have to go and heal in therapy. And unless they do, they're never going to see you. And they don't even really see you in idealization, by the way. And then some people with BPD will come to realize how faulty their self-technique or, self-protection really is. Because you see, it helped them survive in childhood, but it becomes super maladaptive defenses in adulthood. And a lot of people with BPD may or may not know that they made a lot of sort of really poor decisions, if they made any decisions at all. Because sometimes people with BPD, and not everybody's the same, they let circumstances make choices for them, and then they get engulfment fear, and they'll say, I feel controlled. So they've abdicated control or autonomy because they don't know how to be autonomous with a self that they don't know, and then they'll throw that out at you too. So sometimes, it's really hard for most people, especially untreated with BPD, to ask for what they want, totally. So they're looking to you subconsciously as a parent. And then whatever they need, they just feel like the favorite person, the friend, or the partner is supposed to make happen for them. So if they feel like they need to be intellectually stimulated, then why isn't that happening? If they feel like they have unmet needs and they're hurting, well, do something about it. I'm hungry. Guess that I'm hungry and make me a sandwich. That type of thing. I'm not saying that's literal in everybody's lives, but they can get lost in daydreams, be addicted to Facebook, be addicted to different things online, and just spend entire days without functioning, entire days without doing anything. Don't know how to take personal responsibility or accountability. So all of this, right, is like you trying to love the person with BPD. You're like that picture there, right? You're that person, although that's a man, but you're that person there trying to push this rock up a hill. Who would be calling me now? It just never ends. Okay, well, at least it didn't make any noise. Positive, right? So you're like that person pushing the rock up a hill, a mountain, only you can't kind of get off the ground. See, really close, and it's going to come back and roll over you. In physical stress, physiological stress, being exhausted, all your own codependency, all your own worst fears and anxieties, and not understanding why what you're giving isn't good enough, yet it can't be good enough because they really need it from that mother or father that didn't give them what they really needed. Let's see, is there much else that I wanted to say here in the beginning? Yes, people with BPD harm themselves a lot, not just self-harm, but in the many ways that they try to relate, that they don't understand why it's not effective relating or even positive for someone else. And so they can just get lost inside themselves when they're feeling like nobody's heard them or nobody cares, or they feel like they weren't validated enough or validated at all. And then they feel desperate for connection, but unable to find a mature way or emotionally intelligent way to connect with somebody. And again, that's because they're in the one down position often of feeling really bad about themselves. And they can find that exhausting on their side of things. And people with BPD will say they need a lot of hugs, they need a lot of encouragement. They need help with a lot of things, and they need love. Okay, but when you're in a relationship trying to love them, they take. What do they give? And then a lot of people online will say, well, people with BPD want and they need love. And, just love me and validate me. And, the only problem with that is, okay, well, people do that, but it can never be good enough. And people who go to therapy and do the deeper work figure that part out as to why. Many, many years ago, I figured that out. I wanted what I wanted from my mommy. Nobody else, no matter how much they gave me, was going to matter till I found myself and started to meet my own needs. So then there's the other flip side of this too, the sorrow. The sorrow and the stress and the abject pain of watching somebody that you are trying to love, that you really do love, you care about, trying to love, right? But it's not working out so well. Watching them in what is suffering, in what is disconnected lostness, and a whole lot of other things, as I've just explained, and immense unmet needs that they don't know how to do anything about. And all those emotions they don't know how to regulate or cope with. So people on the other side of trying to love somebody with BPD can often get physically sick, stressed out, overreactionary, lose themselves in so many ways. Watching somebody, and not everybody with BPD is the same, but just continually harm themselves in one way or another. It might not be self-harm. It might be just the harm of really never getting off the couch, or the harm of never getting outside the comfort zone, or the harm of not going to therapy, and the harm of always looking to that person for what they need, and that person's tried to give them what they need, but then they reject it, and then everything becomes conflictual and difficult and stressful and exhausting, and those justify, argue, defend, explain, conversations that go on for hours and hours and get you nowhere with a person with BPD more often than not. So many people have continued on this same path of trying to love a person with BPD. And then some people say, I've had a lot of clients say to me, and I tried so hard and I did everything I could, but I failed. Well, let me just say, I don't know, wherever you are today in your life, if you're somebody trying to love somebody with BPD, or if you're the ex of a BPD, or you got ghosted by somebody with BPD, please know that it's not that you failed. You were trying to do the impossible in the first place. And if anybody's been failed, you failed yourself. But then that often goes to the unhealthy relational patterns of self-abandonment that is at the heart of codependency. And then a lot of people have a really hard time watching what people with BPD are doing to themselves. And even sometimes codependents are still focused on that and not like what's happening to them. But they're like, I just can't believe this person just keeps on getting in their own way, losing jobs, won't even go find a job, isn't paying their part of the rent, doesn't take any responsibility, can't even do the dishes. I go to work, I come home, they're just sitting there reading Facebook. They're just sitting there doing nothing, or they're just sleeping, or whatever the case. And then I think, too, I'll just say one little word about psych meds can really screw people up, okay? Different adverse effects, the fact that they don't always work or they don't really work. So that can add a lot of problems for people with BPD to deal with as well, let alone the co-occurring disorders that they stack up on them these days and the comorbidity that they throw at them, which I have to wonder if more often than not it's not so accurate, it's not really helpful, and it's not really what's happening, because a lot of those things could be chalked up to the effects of psych meds. And I've had a few clients say to me recently, but like over the years too, I think what I need to do is just get off all this crap and let my brain heal. And boy, that's not easy, but that can be an amazing thing, because these medications can block people with BPD's recovery. So sometimes the codependent gives up trying to love the borderline, heartbroken because you simply can't watch it anymore. And you feel so powerless and helpless to change it. Or you realize, I can't stop this train that's going in the wrong direction. And then there's this real feeling of, incredible sorrow and heartbreak. And even years later, people can sometimes have this come back. And it's like, that's why it's so important to get into deeper healing and recovery. Because memories will exist for probably ever, but they don't have to be engaged emotionally. And people always, after these relationships, when they've tried to love somebody with BPD, say, I just wish it could be different, or it could have been different. And if only wishes, kind of came true. But when we're wishing for something that isn't happening, that's when it's time to really pay attention to what's not happening. And not necessarily why at that point, just understanding what's not happening. So people, loved ones watch people with BPD continue to hurt themselves, hurt other people, hurt them as well. And just seems like they can't stop, or they won't stop, or sometimes it seems like they really know what they're doing too, but often they don't, but still doesn't excuse it. So watching a loved one with BPD degrade and hurt themselves over and over again, and their behavior, and maybe like shout at you, or asking them to stop the blaming, they blame you for everything that they're feeling, everything that's wrong and negative in their life. And you can't bring yourself, often people can't bring themselves to abandon someone in that situation. And yet, you got to realize people with codependency are abandoning yourself instead. And two lost and abandoned and worn down people, it's just not going to work. So watching all of it unfold is very gut-wrenching for people. And then they feel bad if they want to make changes in their own life. Sometimes people are throwing up due to the anxiety when they're trying to love somebody with BPD. Sometimes they have chest pains that are the emotional pain, if not from something else. And, often when people get ghosted, or by the time they leave, and years later, they'll say their heart still hasn't healed and that they don't know if it ever will. And of course it feels that way. It doesn't mean that that's really the case, but it absolutely, there's such a plethora of overwhelming feelings for people in these circumstances. And I just want to say again, trying to love someone with BPD is futility in more cases than not, does not work, and trying isn't doing. Trying isn't getting there, and it's not your fault that you're not getting there. So let me see here. I'm just looking at some comments now. I can only soliloquy for so long. Hey there, Al. How are you doing? And hi, Deborah. Seti was here, or Seti's here too. I don't know if you're still here. Lots of comments about the sound. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, cool. Hey there, Ryan. Quiet BPDX, I feel like I'm terrified if he comes back and terrified if he doesn't. Yeah, that's really, I totally understand what you mean. And it's so compelling. And people, yeah, that's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place for sure, isn't it? And I wonder, have you ever thought about writing down or journaling, what you're most terrified if he comes back, terrified of if he comes back, and what will you do? And what are you most terrified if he doesn't? Because how are you able to move forward or concentrate on yourself if this might be one of your main focuses more often than not? And Natalie, hey, oh yeah, you caught live stream. I know you've been watching them after for a while, eh? Nice to see you, so to speak. Excuse me. All this talking screws up the voice. Roller girl, yes, pushing the rock up the hill, or we are willing to die on this mountain. Yes, and it's not even your mountain, right? And then Roller Girl, he said, dealing with the BPD, NPD. Yes. Hey there, Sarah. How were they able to give in the beginning? How were they able to? Well, that is, again, it's not love bombing like narcissists, right? It's the idealization, and it's also the mirroring, and it's very much from people with BPD. Their codependency of people pleasing you because they're desperate for connection. So, but they're trying to meet their own needs at that point in time, and so it's not really the giving that it seems like it is. And I have a video out there too, but I think it's called Inside BPD Idealization, because they don't really see you more in idealization than they do in devaluation, like see you versus seeing object other parent representation. So it's a good question, and I think really that what they were giving in the beginning was trying to please, trying to connect, maybe trying to even do the best they could, but it really wasn't the giving that so many people believe it is initially. Roller Girl, that's me, 7 years now, stressed by this every day, in quarantine with a BPD-NPD boyfriend who is 13 hours on the couch watching TV every day. Heartbroken today. Your words are spot on, AJ. Well, I really feel for you, Roller Girl, and I really hope that you're going to take some action for yourself, because that relationship, unfortunately, especially BPD, comorbid NPD, it's not ever going to change, and all you can do is take care of you, change you, and maybe make a different choice in your life. Well, when Sarah asked you if you're ready to leave, you said it's your home. You're torn. Yeah, lots of people are torn, but I guess you have to think about, you said that what I've been describing is you stressed by this every day for 7 years now. And, you really need to, I don't want to scare anybody, but you really need to think about how's your health going to keep standing up under that kind of pressure. Mental health, but your physical health as well. And it's also known that all this stress, from people with BPD, worse with people with NPD, but BPD, comorbid NPD, a little bit worse than BPD even. But, people get so stressed and so affected that, you can develop CPTSD. You can also have your hippocampus shrink, your amygdala, I forget what it's called, but screwing up somehow. And your brain is being impacted by all this stress, and or worse, like how you're treated, and that you give, and they take, So I wonder, Roller Girl, if you can, you don't have to mention it here, but if you can start to try to think about what is it you're so torn between or torn about, because you're abandoning yourself, and I mean that with all due respect. And people have to work it through, although I will say, there's never a time that you're going to feel ready. It's not going to be like, oh, hee-haw, today's the day, I'm out of here. Maybe people feel that way sometimes, but it's not a case of feeling ready. It's just a case of taking action. And Sarah said, yeah, it's really hard, but there's no one there to love you back, and he can't see you for who you are. Well, and that's true about what Roller Girl said and what so many other people are going through as well. And then Sarah said to Roller Girl, basically, but we'll say it to anybody out there who feels torn and doesn't know what to do. Sarah said, I hope you find the courage to do what is good and right for you. It's definitely a process, not an easy one. Very true. Deborah Gruby, you mentioned complex BPD. Is that the same as complex PTSD? No, Dr. Fox is the one pioneering this term. I don't think it exists anywhere else. And no, he means complex BPD is when people have comorbid diagnoses or co-occurring diagnoses. So I'm not really that hip or on to what he's talking about. I just, referenced it to say that he's looking at BPD as if only 7% have pure BPD. I think it's a big misnomer in the pseudoscience, and I know he's not a psychiatrist, but psychologists are following the ideology called pseudoscience of psychiatry, American psychiatry in particular. So, but no, he doesn't mean it's the same as complex PTSD at all. And you watch, because professional after professional, there are many who are getting it. I'm one of them, but many of them, especially that specialize in BPD, NPD, or BPD, they're not going to take CPTSD on board. They're not going to look at the adverse childhood response that all this really means and is, because it's not pathology, but they like to pathologize, or they have been trained to pathologize and they can't think outside the box or something. And I'm not just talking about that one person in this case. I'm not really at all, just generally. Now, I blocked him yesterday. Wow, good for you. That was a huge and scary milestone for me. Yes, I can appreciate that. I'm going to need a lot of support, so afraid that after a while I might unblock in a moment of weakness. Well, yes, and I hear you, but just take it, if you have to take it a minute at a time, an hour at a time, half a day at a time, but definitely only a day at a time. And just keep remembering, and if you haven't already, journal why you made that decision so you can remind yourself, go back and read it. If you start thinking, oh, well, maybe, I'm feeling really bad about myself for doing this, and maybe he wasn't that bad after all. Well, write it down now, How did you get to the blocking him yesterday? Huge and scary milestone. Congratulations on that, by the way. And so, yeah, write down why you did it when you did it to remind yourself in case you do feel like you'd like to undo it. Because it's normal to feel that way, but important maybe not to act on those feelings. Deb, hi AJ and all. Happy to be here to listen and learn. Oh, well, thank you. I hope I say something learn-worthy. Roller Girl, I'm standing on my boundaries today and staying away from him. I can't put him out because I fear abandonment too. Stockholm Syndrome. Well, yeah, and if you know that, don't you think it's maybe time to give yourself the gift of, starting to look somewhere, if you're not in therapy already, to work with somebody to work that through. It's not easy, but it's so rewarding. Hey there, Ted, how are you doing? And Deborah Groovy to L. It was one of the hardest things I've ever did to go no contact. Ever done, I guess. Yeah, sorry. When you are done, you will know, and they will too. That's when they really come at you. Stay strong. Can be in many cases, yes. Sarah, it took me 5 years to finally be done. He became progressively worse in his demeanor towards me over the years. Well, at least you're there now. So you have to be kind to yourself about the journey to where you are right now. And Ryan said, quiet BPD asked me into relationship, but 7 months down the line, during what I believe was a split, was saying he didn't ever want a relationship again, tried everything to try and make him see sense. Yeah, and I bet you that was really painful, Ryan. I'm sorry to hear that, because it's not always 1 minute and then the next minute something different. Sometimes it is a matter of year, or with 7 months, but still, and then I'm sure there was maybe a lot of he was probably going through a lot of stress and back and forth, because people with BPD have been so wounded in childhood. I'm not saying this as an excuse, but they just really don't know how to relate to people. I guess that's the simplest way to put it. And Wheels, oh wow. Oh, you so do deserve to leave. Absolutely you do. And, you don't have anything to feel bad about. You need to break free and get free, and you deserve that. Sarah, is there anything we can say to a quiet BPD so they can externalize their feelings or feel comfortable communicating? Oh, that's a great question. And actually, probably not. Because I know when I work with people with quiet BPD, that's the most challenging part of the process, is to get them to actually start speaking. And even just in general, because sometimes it's like pulling teeth, question after question after question, and just trying to go around things, not like hitting at the heart of something. And so it's very difficult in therapy for them to be helped or guided or supported and or guided, etc., to even start talking about feelings and or in some cases talk much at all. So I don't think there's anything that people can really do with someone with quiet BP that you've known or that's been in your life or is in your life. And Sarah, my ex texted me 2 times, asked me how I was doing. I responded neutrally, and he disappeared again. What was the point of that even? It feels like crumbs of communication. Well, actually, more than likely that's unbeknownst to him, so not really consciously known. You must still represent the object other of object constancy to him, which they lack. So when he gets a reply back from you, neutral as it is, it's like you've just given him another sense that he really does exist because you're there, right? So that's kind of what it is. It's when they have identified someone, been close, and you've been object other, it often takes them a lot of time or years to replace one person as object other to another, because just because they go on to somebody else, they don't necessarily get the object other type of, well, in quotes, status, unquote. It's not really a status at all. So often they will continue to try to communicate with an ex because that's really where object other lies for them. And so they don't feel like they exist without that. They need that for identity. And that's probably why he did that, because obviously your response back to him was more important to him. And of course, what did he do? He just took it, right? Just taking. No reply back. So you might want to think about that in terms of why would you want to do that again? Because there's nothing ever is going to come your way. And, well, in Roller Girl, you said that to Sarah, he was testing for attention and supply. People with BPD are not seeking supply. They really aren't. Narcissists are, and there's a difference and it matters, but I know all over the internet everybody's saying, oh, people with BPD want supply. No, people with BPD are trying to feel like they exist and have their identity parked in someone else, known as the object other, because they lack object constancy, because they don't know who they are. And it's not really just about testing either. It's this recontact to get a sense back of identity again, like, oh, okay, because it's subconscious and it's all about the object other. And Sarah said, he doesn't faze me anymore. I don't get anxious seeing his text. I'm ready pretty much to go no contact. He messages me every few months now. Supply is laughable. I'm living my life and healing. Well, he's not doing it for supply, but, it's good that you're living your life and healing. And so, you might want, people need to think about going no contact because it enhances your healing and living. And because I don't know that it's really that accurate to say that one day you'll just be all totally ready for it. So I think if people are waiting to be ready, they might be cheating themselves out of some peace and space and whatnot for quite a while. Well, and in that case, Roller Girl, I mean, I just want to respectfully say to you, no fun, you said yes. And everything I say to him, he just causes him to argue. Well, when is enough going to be enough? Because I hope it's enough for you before your house starts giving out on you or something. And Sarah said to Roller Girl, I would tell him how I was feeling, and yep, he would feel like triggered too, and it was always about him. Well, and that's something that, in a lot of ways, for different reasons, may I stress, people with BPD or NPD, it's always about them, but not for the same reasons. But then, not that matters in people's experience. And Sarah, I'm still dealing with feeling very bad about going no contact. I cared for him so much. Yeah, but maybe you're not going to be able to solve why do you feel so bad about it until you actually do it. Because again, it's the doing of something that then takes people to that other level, wherever they are, of healing, because it opens up a lens that you can't have open right now to see something differently, to feel something differently. And yeah, maybe struggle a little bit with coping with it, or struggle a lot with coping with it. But it's a step on the journey that awaits you that will be difficult, but will augment your journey. And, so I think you're holding yourself back with the feelings of how it feels, and you're not ever probably going to feel ready or all fine about it. So, something to think about, because it's obviously your choice, but it's something that you really do need. People really do need. So I wonder why you keep denying yourself that. That's something for you to just think about. I'm not asking you to answer the question. So I think it's, Deborah Gruby said, what I find so hard is all these personality disorders intertwine. Well, do they really? That's what's said out there. That's what everybody thinks. But do they really would be my question. Because they don't really. Not in all individuals, for sure. But you said, I worried so much about what it was he had or did not have. Yes, and people get really hung up on that. And that's really not good for people. And you said, I felt like I was judging. His doctor said he had BPD. His doctor said he had BPD. And then, of course, he himself said he didn't. Well, yeah, okay, but you can probably trust that he has BPD. A lot of people won't accept it for some reason. And, of course, they're not going to go anywhere in a hurry, right? Because they won't go to therapy. They won't ask for help. They won't try to help themselves even, if they're just in outright denial. And Sarah said, it makes me feel like I'm a bad person if I block him. Well, yeah, but maybe, I can tell you this much, Sarah, that feeling of that you're a bad person is coming from much deeper within you than whether or not you block him, and it's not all about him. So again, I would encourage you to do it and then deal with the feelings, because it really doesn't work in reverse. But, hey, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just saying it would really help you, and it's never really going to feel good. It will, but it won't feel good to do it. But you so deserve to do it. Because I'm starting to realize where the guilt is coming from. I think it's about my dad. I'm starting to see that he probably doesn't love me either. Felt like a punch in the gut when that thought hit me. Yes, well, I understand that. That's very, very difficult for sure. And the number of times he's left you to, the other one and not protected you, might be a lot of fear there, but certainly he's more fear-based and codependent, etc. But that's not love. That's not loving you for sure. Roller Girl, I get that when you say BPD doesn't want supply now. My boyfriend displays, but well, yes, I know, but you were saying that to somebody who was talking about somebody with BPD. That's why I said that again. And when you say your boyfriend displays both, I wonder how you know that, because it's interesting. I'm going to be doing some videos on it. And then when I finished finding, I've got a lot under my belt now that I've read and found. And one of the interesting things that I haven't found, because it's not out there, this has not been very studied, this BPD, NPD comorbidity that everybody online is talking about. It's like loose lips sink ships, because there's less fact to all that stuff than you'd think. So I wonder how you know that, because there's narcissism within BPD itself, and it's not the same to the same level or degree as in NPD. So, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about that. Yeah, I saw that, Sarah. It's okay. It was a typo, yeah. Ryan, do you think my quiet BPDX is as upset about the breakup as I am? Feels like he isn't struggling at all. Yeah, he probably isn't as upset as you are, Ryan, because you have a more full range of feelings, and you probably were really connected, and you probably really cared for him, if not loved him, and you were attached, and he can't really love, and he can't really attach, and he's kind of probably having a rather childlike response to everything, and it could be out of sight, out of mind. You know, for many with BPD it is. And the other thing is, yeah, he's not struggling at all because he doesn't even have the maturity to recognize the loss. People with BPD will keep accruing loss after loss after loss, and it just gets added on to an unaddressed stockpile from the past that's already a size of a mountain of accrued loss that they will not look at, that they don't know how to go anywhere near. And even working with people with BPD, it's very difficult to get them to sort of inch toward that process. So, you know, I hope that, you know, I really feel for you, because I think people need to embrace the reality that people with BPD often, you know, and untreated, they don't attach to you, they don't love you, they don't really feel, right, in a mature adult way what you feel for them. And so it is very different, and it can be very heartbreaking and feel very lonely that you thought you were connected to this person and you really cared, and no, they're struggling mightily with everything from their childhood, and that's going to add on to the pile. But unless they ever go to therapy and deal with that, no, he's not really feeling that, I'm sorry to say. Because I think many people take that information differently. Some people really want them to hurt. Some people really want them to feel what they feel. But it's very difficult for all those reasons and so many more. And Wheels, well, I think that's happening because you've been so gaslit, right? And so you're still having to try to internalize and believe and reaffirm your own reality. And keep doing that, because I think you've been doing a lot of that, and that will help you a lot. And you said, I realize I'll probably never feel like leaving would be justified no matter what I should probably stop waiting for that. Well, they're never going to see it as justified, but like, that's what you have to let go of. Like, you have to know what you need. You have to know it's justified for you, and keep working to believe in that, because you've been gaslit a lot. So it's not abnormal for someone in your situation to doubt themselves a lot, but you just have to keep reminding yourself affirmations and writing things down. Well, I don't know if you have the freedom like to write things down, but like where you can look at things or something to remind you, you need to, because they're never going to see what would justify what you definitely need to do. But that's only you need to understand that. Don't think that they're ever going to get it. Doesn't matter. You just need to get out of there. And Deborah Groovy, I thought they felt, quote, too much, unquote, and it was all about their feelings. I get so confused with this. Well, many people with BPD, they do feel too much most of the time. Maybe for some it's all of the time. But if they ghost someone, or there's a like, they initiate the breakup, or like, which is ghosting essentially, because they don't talk about it, there's no resolution, or if someone leaves them, then what happens is those feelings, it's not like there aren't a lot of feelings there, but they protect a lot against them. So they basically deny and push them down, and they do that in various different ways. But so there are some people with BPD that if someone leaves them, because they don't all ghost, they don't all leave, then they might be devastated, and they might really be in emotional dysregulation, feeling tons. But there are also lots of people out there with BPD who protect themselves better from sort of like infantile defenses, actually, and they have this, like, it is kind of a 2-year-old thing at this point, out of sight, out of mind. So Like, if I don't see you and I don't hear you and I don't think about you or I don't care about you anymore, then you don't exist, which is really a projection of what they're going through with how they don't exist, projecting that out. So, and some people with BPD are more clingy, more needy, not going to leave, not going to ghost. And some people with BPD are the opposite, and they can't get that close, and they don't know how to, they're not clingy, and they're more likely to be the, cut it off, ghost, leave, and out of sight, out of mind kind of mentality. So, again, not all of them are the same. So if you're getting confused, it might be because you're maybe thinking of them as all being one way or the other. And Sarah said, how frequently does a person with quiet BPD experience dissociation? Well, yes, it is different for everyone, but people with BPD experience dissociation often, like many of them, often like maybe even daily to several times a week, or every time they have any kind of a quote episode, unquote, whatever that looks like, acted out, externalized or internalized. So there's a lot of dissociation involved, actually. And I'm going to have a lot more coming on what happens when that dissociation kind of goes over the edge of, quote, normal in BPD. And what's that look like? Because there's someone I'm aware of doing some real pioneering work on this. It's actually, they're working with clients with it. So it's not just some ridiculous study that's going to come up with ideology only and not be able to prove itself. Roller Girl, I've watched my boyfriend displays both traits of both disorders. He was in prison for 20 plus years, arrested development emotionally, excuse me, tantrums and bullying, yes, gaslighting, discard, repeat cycle. Well, yeah, but it's hard to say, like he should really get assessed, and I guess he wants no part of that. But again, in all the things I've been reading in all the journals and all the plowing through all that crap that one has to plow through, there's very little, even in the studies such as they are, that talks about this. And it's very often not diagnosed that often. So people are really sure of what they're going. I'm not saying that you could be right as all heck, or maybe not. I don't know. But there isn't as much of this diagnostic stuff going on. It hasn't been studied. It has that much. And so I would say then it comes down to whether a diagnosing professional is, what is their bent towards? Is it Kernberg? Is it Kahoot? Is it Kohut? Sorry, however you say his name. Or, it just depends, because it's really in the Kernbergian explanation of narcissism that we can see this conflation, and yet it's not exactly what Kernberg says, or this comorbidity. So I'm going to, I'm almost ready to do a video that should be semi-articulate about this, not quite yet, but it's way overblown. Let me put it that way. So there are people out there that do have the comorbidity, but it's way overblown. And why aren't there more studies, and why aren't there more diagnostic criteria and other means and methods of teasing out both? Because a lot is lacking in that area. And you said, I asked him to, again, shut the front door because the air conditioner's on. He proceeded to throw dog food everywhere. BPD. Then the narc-ego shows up in him. Oh, I wonder if you're going to tell us what he does with that part then, because that would be interesting. Well, the fact that, he would have the front door open because the air, and with the air conditioner on, I mean, there's the helplessness, the learned helplessness, the whatever of BPD as well as throwing the dog food everywhere. But then when you said, then the narc-ego shows up in him, I'm hoping you're going to say what that looks like, or how you experience that, or what he does next. I don't know, though, if you're going to. Because you have to remember, there's, there's a difference, but yet an overlap, but that doesn't drive comorbidity necessarily of, what is it, wounded ego, and to what degree is it? And so, is it BPD or is it NPD? And that's all the complicated stuff that they really haven't studied or even tried to figure out. Probably because there's no real medication push for NPD. Probably because, in some of these things I've read, they'll just say, well, treatment outcomes for those with NPD or treatment possibilities, it really isn't a good way to treat them, which is not what every clinician believes, but what a lot of people, it depends, on degrees. But that's what a lot of the literature just stops right there. So they're not really studying it. But so if someone is trying to love someone with BPD, trying isn't actually achieving it, and you don't get love back, and the same can be said for NPD as well. So I don't know if you're gonna, I would love to hear, Roller Girl, then what happens when the narc ego shows up in him? Because, you said that was yesterday. The narc then calls names, threatens, and discards. That might not be narcissistic personality at all. It could still be within BPD. Just saying. Don't know. SETI, my ex was diagnosed BPD, but as I compulsively, in quotes, investigate, and months of this, there seems to be more than the borderline aspect. Well, and I don't know, right? But I would ask you, in what way do you think that's helping you, as opposed to helping yourself, rather than compulsively trying to figure out if they have BPD only or something else with it? And I mean that really respectfully, right? Sarah, my ex hasn't seen me in person in almost 3 years. Could he still think of me as object other? Well, he could, if he really hasn't got to a certain kind of relational sort of projective identification with anyone else, for lack of a better way to put it. Could he still think, yes, I read that. He told me he loves me, but he doesn't want me, whatever that means. Yeah, well, that might sound a little bit like how we might love a parent, but really doesn't or really doesn't want to see them, even if they're still around, or might have felt that way. That seems to ostensibly hit at the conflict of the good mother, and the bad mother, that one wants to love the good mother, but one really doesn't. One kind of really can't stand the bad mother, and the split, and then they never come back together. So it sounds like he's got something going on with that for sure. And Ryan, after we split, I felt like I was going crazy. I got paranoia and definitely felt like I had PTSD. Wake up every day full of dread. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Ryan. And, if you're not working with somebody yet, it would really help you too, because you said the relationship was 7 months long, so I don't know how long it's been since, or maybe you'd said it was 7, I don't know how long it's been since, it ended, but, yeah, it like, what you're describing happens to a lot of people in various different ways, and I wonder if you've identified what that when you wake up every day full of dread, what is that about? Is that the pain that the relationship is over, that he's gone, that, and or is it more that you're worried about, or you wish that he would contact you? I mean, it's just important to get into working with someone, if you haven't already, to be able to look at all these things, because, it sounds like you're really suffering for sure, and I'm sorry to hear that. Wheels, I literally feel like the life is being sucked out of me. Nothing around me makes any sense. I'm trying to figure out a few things so I don't end up somewhere else. Yeah, right. Well, yeah, and it sounds like you're sort of finding yourself, because it's got to all be pretty scary. And it sounds like you're finding yourself sort of vacillating between how much you need to get out, probably how much you even want to get out, but then another part of you that kind of just doesn't want it to all be real. And it's sort of like that, this might be in your subconscious, the sense of hoping that something will change so that you don't have to go through the agony of, trying to find somewhere else that will be safe, because particularly of, your situation and circumstance. Roller Girl, Ryan, yes, PTSD and dread, I'm sorry too. Well, yeah, and it might be, could be PTSD or it could be CPTSD, but that's interesting that, you're still with your cluster B person, Roller Girl, and you feel dread, and Ryan, the relationship ended, but feeling dread. So Dread can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and that's what people have to be able to identify for themselves too. It's getting in touch with feelings at a deeper level, like identifying them is good. That's a start. But then I wonder if either of you have ever thought of what really does dread mean? What other feelings come under the heading of dread? And so how much of those feelings are you feeling? Are you aware of it or not aware of it? And, what could you do to help yourself out with that? Because so much of this that keeps people stuck, maybe in the relationship, stuck after the relationship, which, takes time. But it's all about the sort of disavowed emotions that people continue to push away and deny or disavow or just not take in or not, really look into because, yeah, it's going to hurt, but it's going to be the way forward to healing. Yeah, I can understand that, Deborah Groovy, and I think that, that's something that goes back to people's childhoods, because what is there to feel bad or guilt about with these people that wreck your life, that don't love you, can't attach to you, take. I mean, not to say people can't feel that way, but I think also it speaks more to something that's on a deeper level that, yeah, it's a duality there that needs that multifaceted healing. That's why I'm always talking about the inner child healing and the family of origin work and the self-differentiation and more too, that I don't, just like, it's more extensive. And it's different for every person. Like when I work with clients, it's really rare if 4 or 5 people I'm working with out of all the people I work with at a given time are in essentially the same kind of process moving forward because everybody's so different. Well, I don't know, Wheels. That's really difficult because, she might try that. And then again, if you don't leave, and then again in the trying to leave, that's why that has to be planned and organized and done with support and some safety around you because maybe when if you can get to that point and you are leaving. But I think it sounds like, in a way, you're experiencing denial with the difficulty of leaving. And who knows, maybe a lot of other feelings that are underneath about that as well. It's not an easy thing to do, emotionally or otherwise, obviously. Roller Girl, I'm 7.5 years sober. Good for you. I felt like drinking, but I don't. So I'm working through this process. Well, that's excellent. That's a lot of growth on your part. Deborah Groovy, he's an example. I go no contact, and he calls and says his car broke down, and he's stuck on the highway, and I need to pick him up. I didn't, and then I got a ton of texts saying how heartless I was. Well, yeah, but that's him just shifting responsibility and other things, right? That, if his car breaks down, he kind of has to deal with that. He kind of has to take responsibility, and maybe if he has a friend or anyone in his life, or if he treated you better, and was more mature, then he would understand that if he had built the kind of connection and relationship with somebody that would make somebody obviously go and help them, but he doesn't get that that's not the case, right? So again, just the lack of responsibility and the lack of accountability and expecting other people to do things. Like it's really, I guess, childish, childlike, emotionally immature of them, but it also shows where that entitlement comes out, and then they tell you you're heartless. Well, you got to ignore that part because it has nothing to do with the whole thing, but it's probably the hardest part to ignore. And he said it was a shock to me that she lied about her life so much and confidently, yet I felt a connection that was revealed as fake, not true. I feel like I was fooled. I'm not sure how to categorize it. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that happen, Seti. I mean, that's really difficult to deal with, but I think what I was just advocating for you to think more about, and maybe you're doing both, but the more you try to figure her out exactly, and for some people that's also a search for closure, it's like, are you taking care of you and how are you doing for you and with yourself? Because that's horrible to go through what you went through, without doubt. But now it's like, rather than, and feeling fooled is very painful, but if you can try to radically accept that, in the sense that it wasn't your fault, and, it doesn't say anything about you, it says everything about her. And, well, the fact that he said, Deborah Gruby, that you're heartless, that's just, it's so immature, because they don't have emotional intelligence. It's so immature of him to have those expectations of you, right? Again, he's got expectations of you as an ex that are like, hey, you're my mommy, you got to do this. No, you don't. No, you're not. So... yes, boundaries are self-love. Well said, Wheels. And people need to keep remembering that, especially when it's very difficult and when boundaries are new. And also, Deborah Gruby, you should think about no contact, because then he couldn't have called you to say, or texted you or whatever he did, to say that his car broke down. You wouldn't have to deal with it. You wouldn't have to feel bad, because this is what they do, so it's difficult, though, because I think, and the way I work with clients, what I see is people need to talk about the relationship. They need to talk about, what's just whether they're out of the relationship is over. They need to work on that, to work through healing that. But really, the way to heal that in a most, I don't know how to use the way to really heal that relationship and heal from it is by doing the deeper work, family of origin, inner child healing, and then once you understand what's underneath for you, you come back to looking at the relationship again. Still a lot of pain there to deal. But I think looking at it that way helps people so much more than just trying to figure it all out about them and then help yourself. It's a little bit it's a little bit blocking in doing things that way for people. More often than not, Deborah, normally my instinct is to help someone out who's stranded on the side of the road. It was just weird. I stayed no contact. He's been gone for a few years, but it messed me up. Well, but he contacted you, right? Yeah, you said you went no contact and then he called you. So that isn't full no contact. And I'm not, not trying to say, hey, I'm just saying, is that enough self-care for you to be taking? You need to take maybe more self-care. I think that most people want to help somebody who's stranded on the highway, but not if they've been horrible to you, and they have BPD or NPD and they are the way they are, it's like, and that they can't help themselves or they refuse to help themselves, and yet when you don't go rescue them, it's like they probably find their way out of it somehow, don't they? Wheels, yeah, AJ, this whole thing is so whacked that I think my brain just tries to shut out a lot of it. Yeah, it does make sense. And I think what's important that you don't shut out is, the fact that all that matters right now, you got to keep telling yourself this, all that matters right now is you. All that matters right now is getting out of there. And until you do get out of there, you're not going to be able to resolve all these other feelings and how gaslit you've been. And it's like, so it's kind of like all of these processes require, at some point in people's lives, a leap of faith, or if I don't mean faith literally, so just a leap of faith, or a leap forward when people are leaping into the darkness, right? So it's not comfortable for sure, and it feels very scary. And then you said he was in jail again for 4 months recently. I was doing better back then. Well, and just because he goes to jail is not evidence of BPD, NPD, comorbid either, because many people, and even a little bit higher propensity of males with BPD, they do end up in jail a lot. Some of them, not all of them. But when you're trying to love that person who has BPD, this is who you're trying to love, really. Look at that. Well, it's not up there yet, but what does that mean that this is a person that you're really trying to love? Because even though this is a more digital sort of, whatever, this reality here is that this is a hollow individual. This is somebody who doesn't know themselves, and you're trying to love them, and they already have some sense of lost self, whether they know it as that or not. And so you're trying to put something inside of them that just goes right on through. And so that's why I say trying to love someone with BPD is impossible futility, because they can't take it in no matter how much you give, and you just can't change them. And then people end up doing this. Well, hopefully people get to feeling their emotions, because there's a lot of reticence against actually just feeling one's emotions. A lot of people have that going on in all kinds of different situations, and believe me, it's loss and it's grief and it hurts, but it's so good to be able to, it's positive to express it. It doesn't feel positive, but it really helps people. And you said you were working and it was a relief that I could get breaks from him. Well, you deserve more than breaks from him, I would just like to say. And MC, can going full no contact cause the borderline to feel abandonment feelings and dissociate? Yes, it can. And my long distance boyfriend is a quiet BPD, and he goes silent on me for days or weeks at a time. Yeah, because that's feelings of abandonment. And, there's another thing maybe people could just read for a second and think about. It does, but you know what? That is, I don't know why it's buffering. It's not buffering at my end, but you never know. But MC, the thing is, when you do what you need to do for you, you're not responsible for them. So whatever they end up in abandonment feelings or whatever, and or dissociate, that's why they need to go to therapy to learn to handle that. Because that's not something that you cause in them or something that you do to them. It's already there. So have you ever thought, anybody in general, have you ever thought, like, what is true? What was it all lies? I don't know what to believe. Who was she or he really? I'm so confused, I can't stop wondering. And this is where people get into that ruminating, Or maybe he or she is really the person I first met and I want him or her back. Maybe he or she said, wow, they really love you, and you are the one that got closest to them more so than anybody else in the world, which is really kind of like not very true or accurate, because nobody gets that close to them. So I think this is interesting too, because there's so much, whether intentional or unintentional, so much deception happening in these unhealthy bonded relationships. And sometimes people with BPD are lying to themselves. That's the first deception. Or they've been lied to in childhood too, we might say. So they're lying to themselves. And a lot of people with BPD, when they're lying, they actually believe what they're saying. And that's a sort of dissociative process all on its own. So where's the truth? What's really real? When things are fake, is anything really accurate? Does anything they say really matter? And these are the things that people go over in their minds over and over and over. But the reality is, you're still dealing with a basically false self-presentation of maybe pieces or fragments of who that person really could be or was supposed to be, or maybe one day if they go to therapy, they might find, but you're really dealing with this hollowed out remnant of the evacuated self, the split from ego state of child. And so you can pour all you want into that abyss, all the love, all the giving, all the caring, all the feeling bad for them, all the trying to take responsibility for them in the world. But guess what? They're still going to be this hollow person walking around, and only they can make a choice to change that. Only they can decide to go to therapy or not. And the other thing too, like I think I mentioned in another video recently, was people with BPD are always making choices. Whether they're aware of it or not, they are making choices. And of course, they don't want to take responsibility or accountability for that either. WWD, hi, my ex-boyfriend moved in with me a year ago. Wow. He threatened to leave many times. This last time, 2 months ago, I told him, don't do me any favors, go find your happiness if you think I'm so awful. So the question is he still there? And how do you feel about that? What happened with that? You know, because when they do that, you know, I'm going to leave stuff, it's really because they're afraid you're going to leave. But, you know, it's twisted around, isn't it? You know, it's all these projective identifications from a very wounded place that they aren't even aware of. Oh, you said it's good now. Well, I didn't see buffering at my end, but that doesn't mean, you know, hey, could have been at your end, could not have been, I don't know. So it's good that it's good now. So anyway, I think that, you know, people need to really think about this no contact, because it is quite a block to growing and to get, well, first you got to get out of the relationship if they're not ghosting or, if, you know, whatever the case. And then you really have to think about, why are you still invested either in the relationship, being there, or why are you still invested in contact? And I just want to say to people with all due respect, you're never going to feel ready. So if you haven't gone no contact yet, you're cheating yourself out of what you need, and you're blocking your recovery, at least to some, you know, whether that's major or minor blockage in your recovery, it's going to affect it. So it's just super important, but obviously people have to make their own choices and decisions. And I will say as they see fit, because it's not about being ready. Sitai, hey there. Why would someone with BPD not want to go to therapy? Well, I guess the most important answer to that is because within what BPD actually is, there's self-awareness deficit, because loss is self. So a lot of times they're denying, you know, they dissociate from what's really real, like where, you know, at times what's happening to them, they don't understand it. They're emotionally flooded. Then they have dissociation, and the past is flying into the here and now, and they don't recognize that this is something they've already experienced in the past, and so they take it out and they think that the person close to them is causing it. So the self-awareness deficit is a really big one. The next to no emotional growth or maturity or intelligence is another part, because even when they have intellectual awareness, it goes nowhere beyond the intellect, and it's not enough. So even with intellectual awareness, then they usually can use their intellect to just deny, disavow, and rationalize. And it's all cognitively distorted thinking, but this is why so many BPD won't go to therapy, or they might try. And to be relatively, well, I don't like the word fair, but what other word is there? But to be reasonable about it, sometimes they'll reach out and they'll try, and they'll get a crappy therapist, and it's not their fault. And sometimes they'll reach out and try, and it gets to be a lot in a hurry for people, and they're really scared, and they don't know how to cope, and they'll get a lot of, you know, emotional overload and dissociation. That happened to me in BPD recovery for sure. I mean, it always felt like it was going to just take me away somewhere, and I would feel really out of control and super scared, terrified of that. So it's about learning how to cope with those feelings, and a lot of people won't stay in therapy long enough to do that. So those are some of the reasons. And then there's people that just deny it, disavow it. They don't even get anywhere near it. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Wheels, but you have to realize, whatever she says 1 minute is going to be the opposite the next minute, and it's all based on supply. It's all about her. It's not about you. And I'm sorry, sorry to hear that, you know, she was saying they laughed at you the last time, and point being that those are the kind of things that it's really important to, you're going to remember them, but it's really important not to give them the weight over what you already know, and whether or not, cops, whether or not they laugh at a situation or not, they're some of them are either narcissists themselves or some of them just don't get it. Oh, Debbie said, my BPD daughter repeats exact same things day after day, over and over, contradicting views, and seems to not comprehend or memory difficulties from one moment to the next. Is this normal for BPD? Well, it's I don't want to normalize BPD, but I would say it's pretty common. Repeating the exact same things and being contrary, and well, it's hard to say what's going on with whether she comprehends or she's having memory difficulties or not, and I would say that might be largely happening more if someone's on different psychiatric meds or more than a few. But that happens for a lot of people with BPD, unfortunately, and there's nothing you can do to break into that cycle, unfortunately. They have to go to therapy for that, and even then, sometimes they won't hang around long enough for anybody to be able to help them with that. Deborah Groovy, I have depression, OCD, and over 12 years sober. Well, good for you on the 12 years sober, yes. He had BPD. I had to realize my part in all this and move on. We could push each other's buttons, and I wanted sobriety more than him. Yes, good choice for you. Excellent way to take care of yourself. And WWD, he went on and on about my every fault. He's gone through with buying a house, but it needs work. He's still here, but fixing his new house. I didn't have it in me to fight about demanding he go. Well, you might want to rethink that, because that's what you need, and that's what you deserve, but that's really difficult. Because if he's got a new house, maybe he can make it, I don't know what he has to fix in it, but maybe he can make it so one room, if there's a leaky roof or something, he can make one room livable while he fixes the rest of the house. So in that regard, it's like you need to ask yourself, how would you feel if he wasn't there, and what secondary gain payoff, which is negative and not healthy for you, are you getting because he's still there? And if he has a place to go, whether it needs work or not, wouldn't it be best for both of you, no matter what he thinks, wouldn't it be best for you if he went there? Chubang Boone, AJ, can a child become a person with BPD if she's only neglected by her father but not mother? It's unlikely that it would be just that, especially if they had a strong, loving, and caring mother. So maybe somebody might have expressed that they think it's all about their father, but no, it's really about that early caregiving, right, when a child is first born and forward. So unless the father was the main caregiver, no, very unlikely. I would just say no, it's not how it works, actually. Not that people can't really be hurt by fathers. They can, but it's not really the woundedness, unless it's, at that developmental stage. But still, it's going to be more about mother if mother is the main caregiver in the 75% of people with BPD. Well, I hope you don't stay there much longer, Wheels, to let it happen again, because when you say if it happens again, it will happen again. And it might not come the same way that it came the last time. But, if it does happen again and you're still there, you should take your chances and call the police. But hopefully you won't still be there for that to happen. Right. So it sounds like you're very emotionally conflicted, which is totally understandable. And I really feel for you. But it's, and you're up against a lot of challenges, but I wonder, I don't know, because it's difficult and I don't know what's going on in the world right now with stuff. But there must be somewhere that you could go that I don't know if what's holding you back is your own confusion or all these massive differing kinds of feelings back and forth, or just absolutely still can't find anywhere to go. Sitai, is it common for BPD to have empathy towards public at large, animals, etc., but not towards their significant other? Yes, it is, because of what happens for them with, the emotional dysregulation of trying to relate to a significant other, not being able to get, if they get close, then they get engulfed in fear and they have to get away, and then they feel abandoned. And so, yeah, they can show more empathy to an animal, which can sometimes be compromised too, depending if they live with it or not. But to the world at large and to animals, yeah, because they're not in interpersonal relationship or trying to be in interpersonal relationship with animals and people at large. And Deb said, hopefully the police who are involved are trained to deal with people with mental health issues. Well, more often than not, Deb, they're not. They're just not. And even when they are, they're still not that good. Might be some that are excellent, but they're going to be few and far between. And, even here in Ontario, Canada, and in the city I live, and a little bit down the highway, there's been a few people over the last few years that the police took them out rather than help them out, and could have been handled differently. But, oh, yeah, they were trained all right, and but no. I don't know what it is with them these days that they think that one person by themselves without a weapon is going to somehow endanger their lives so that they all have to do the same thing at once and direct it all at one person in some exaggerated, ridiculous, unnecessary fashion. Back in the day, I didn't get in trouble with the police particularly, but if somebody did, even somebody who was maybe say they were just really drunk and disorderly, maybe they had personality disorder, maybe not, maybe they were going to be really difficult to deal with, the cops used to just pull out the old billy club, and they didn't used to draw the other weapon and or taser things, etc. And when you get 5 cops to the scene of something, you're telling me that they can't really get a person without a weapon subdued in a physical manner that doesn't end life? So I know that if I had a loved one who was really, relying on cops to help them at the worst of times, I wouldn't feel very good about that. And yet again, some of them can be really good, but most of them aren't. And Deb, exactly, which is why I would never call police involving people with mental health problems. Well, yeah, it's really hard because they often don't understand, and then it depends on relationship roles, etc. And it does depend on whether you get some, I'm not saying this of all male cops, but there are lots of male cops out there that aren't going to hear a woman no matter what you're saying. WWD, he was hostile for a while, but is being nice now. I think he will go on his own. By the way, the plan is to fix enough to move in. Oh, I see. Can you explain him being neutral in his behavior now? Well, it's likely because, see how they make choices? It's likely because he's not quite ready to live in the house and doesn't want you to, demand that, like you said, or throw him out of there. So he knows what's in his own best interest. And this is the part that makes it interesting about how they can be so out of control for so long, and then all of a sudden, they're being neutral, and they're being nice, and they're making it kind of work out for their own interest. And then sometimes they might be yelling and screaming and say the police do show up, and all of a sudden they're quiet. Or people that get in trouble with the law with BPD, they're yelling and screaming, carrying on and all this stuff. But when they get in court, and some people don't change at all, but some people, they get in court in front of the judge and wow, they look like there's nothing wrong with them. So I have lots of clients who ask me these questions, how could he or she be like this? And then all of a sudden they're like that. Well, because to some degree, for lots of people with BPD, hard to say, they're not all the same, they kind of know at some level about some choices that they're making. But they may well not realize how they're hurting others or impacting others. But when those choices revolve around, lack of self, but revolve around them and what's good for them or not, then sometimes they can come up with a little more control than they seem to anywhere else or any other time in their life. So it's choices actually is the answer. And he's looking out for his own best interest there. So that's why he's being nice and neutral. And the sad thing is, he wouldn't give that to you before, and he's still not really giving it to you now. He's taking care of his own interests, which is, unfortunate and sad to say. But so not all manipulation and boarding of self-interest by people with BPD is subconscious. A lot of people with BPD know what they're doing, and a lot don't. So it's just hard to say across the board. Yeah, well, I can understand that you're confused, Wheels, absolutely. And you're kind of afraid because group homes were brought up, and I'm not sure what that would mean for me. Well, yeah, and I mean, hopefully if you're interfacing with the system, so to speak, maybe there's somebody that you could get to talk to that you can more trust. It might actually become an advocate for you. So what you really need is an advocate, somebody who knows these places, and somebody who wouldn't put you in one that has a bad reputation. Because I know there's a lot of stuff that happens out there that shouldn't happen for sure. So I would just urge everybody who's, able to go no contact right now that hasn't yet, to really delve into what you think that's about. Because there are secondary payoff gains to negative or behavior that isn't in one's best interest, or choices that aren't in one's best interest, because it's not just how you feel. It's how you feel that's what you're aware of. And it's like, I can't do this because I feel like this. But there's something you're gaining from that can be a roadblock to recovery, or a block of a type to further healing and recovery. So that's where I think it's really incumbent upon people still in the relationships or after the relationships. They can't get to you. They can't make you feel, well, they don't make you feel anything, but you won't be feeling like a bad person, and you won't be feeling this way and the other way if you don't have contact with them. If they don't have a chance to say that stuff to you anymore, that's really them manipulating you anyway, and also hurting you. So I just want to say, I'm going to wrap up now, and I got to get going tonight, but I just wanted to say, so trying to love somebody with BPD, trying isn't doing. And the trying doesn't get it accomplished, and it's not your fault. But then if you're spinning your wheels with that, people really got to think about why. And then if they do start therapy, don't think that's going to be the thing that changes everything and saves the relationship, because it takes way, way too long. And I believe I heard Gunderson quoted once, I read somewhere, that he said, he didn't give odds on it, right? But be so very rare. Meaning, like, really don't count on it. Like, I don't even know how to say this, but astronomical and then some, right? Odds that a person with BPD is going to be able to make any change in a relationship, even when one or the other person thinks, well, this is my soulmate and this has to work out. All that magical thinking that keeps people stuck, that, well, or at least I know this person now and they only do this much bad to me. So, but it's scary for people with BPD to go to therapy, and it takes a lot of years. And it's scary for people with codependency or any other issues in their lives to make change. And the thing is, the more you radically accept what is in a neutral way, the more you're going to create the possibility for the change that you seek. Rather than thinking about the change, take steps to radically accept and then take action based on that acceptance of what is, not making it good or bad. It just neutrally is what it is really the way forward to making what feels like impossible changes. Because if people still go on their feelings, those feelings are going to keep you stuck. And Nicole, this is not connected to the topic, and you don't have to respond. It's more NPD or BPD that I feel that my inside self is very vulnerable and crumbled, and I rarely connect to people that deep. Well, yes, and I think that's something that you definitely need to look into and get some help with so you can identify what's happening for you. Because with all due respect, that would be really hard for somebody to figure out by themselves, right? Because there's a little bit of impaired self-awareness, and it can be really confusing, and it sounds like you're in a really painful place, and I hope that you will reach out and get some help with that. Well, I'm glad, Wheels. I think you need to stay on it and keep active, even though it's really, really, like you said, you've been dreading, and of course, but you have to keep looking at the other alternative, which you know all too much about. And Roller Girl, my boyfriend smothers the dog with affection and neglects me. He hurts my feelings on purpose. He is only able to express love to the dog. If he needs something from me, that's when he's nice. Well, but that isn't an indicator of NPD either, just for the record. People with BPD do that all the time because, the dog is not threatening and etc. And so, but I'm sorry to hear that's happening, but why are you settling for that? I would respectfully ask you. You don't have to answer me. I'm just saying, think about that. And Sarah, can one have BPD comorbid with ASPD? Well, I would say absolutely not, but that's what they're forwarding now. But again, pseudoscience, which is ideology, and they're saying apparently that can only happen if you're female. So not to a male with BPD, just to a female. So think about that agenda. My answer is no, but they're forwarding it's possible based on one of the weakest studies I've ever read in my life. Okay, so I won't go all into that again. I've talked about that before. And you said my quiet ex used to say he doesn't have very many feelings. It just means he's not in touch with them. Doesn't mean that he's a psychopath. And you said, yet I was always walking on eggshells afraid of his reactions. That happens with people with BPD most of the time. And then you said, or he was so overwhelmed and didn't know his feelings. Well, yes, it's more likely that. And by the way, he's male, so this is how ridiculous pseudoscience of psychiatry and based on this one ridiculous study. And it's ideology, cognitively biased outcome, which means absolutely nothing anyway. No, but he's male, so he could not be even a candidate to be considered BPD with the, the subtype of ASPD? No, can't happen for males, apparently. So just saying, how ridiculous is that? Because it doesn't happen to women either, but yet women are writing all over the internet who've accepted that diagnosis. It's like crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Factor one in that study was that these women studied with, I take it with BPD, not a great number or anything, not a replicated study or anything. Factor 1 and 2, I mix them up. Factor 1 was that these women seemed rather unemotional. And factor 2, or whichever factor the other factor was, and they seemed rather aloof. Well, guess what? Aloof is not a psychiatric term. Aloof needs a lot of definition. Aloof would go to the human context of why is somebody presenting to be aloof? Are they always aloof? And then the other factor was they seemed unemotional. Well, lots of people with BPD have lots of time in their lives where they're not emotional at all because they're not feeling anything, because their feelings are shut down. It doesn't mean they're psychopathic. So until and unless the pseudoscience of psychiatry comes to some scientific method of study and critique by psychiatrists in the field and allowing them to be published in the professional journals and having studies replicated with similar outcomes, same outcomes actually is what's required for scientific evidence. No, even though people are all over the place and that's what psychiatry is pushing, the answer is no, it's ridiculous. And it will remain ridiculous unless and until they can actually prove it. And they can't prove it right now. So that's what I'm always talking about. They have these big pharma-funded biased studies that give them ideology, biased going in. They can create the outcome easily. Nobody replicates it. Nobody does it over. Nobody proves it. And nobody's allowed to critique it. So I would say, what's the agenda against females with BPD that isn't there against males with BPD? So, no, BPD is BPD. And then there's all this other stuff about, the complexity of it, because all this comorbidity, all these personalities. To me, that's just utter laziness. It's constantly clinicians missing and not paying attention to being client-focused, number one. Number two, they're not paying attention to the human context of what's happened to these people and why are they having the reactions and the difficulties they're having. So this is the pseudoscience of psychiatry. When I interviewed Dr. Niall McLaren back in 2011 twice, one of them is on my channel here, the other one's at Blog Talk Radio, he said, and he was a psychiatrist with also a PhD in philosophy, he said this is crazy stuff hanging by a thread, and that psychiatry is trying to become, quote, real doctors, unquote, and it's all about their egos. And this is what a psychiatrist said about psychiatry. They're trying to make everything medical. And, you know, when you get hurt to the point where your soul, you have a hole in your soul, which is what I would say BPD is, well, there isn't a drug that's going to touch that. And there isn't a pseudoscience scientific study of big pharma and pseudoscience of psychiatry that's going to mean anything for that either. It takes getting in the trenches with people and accepting people and working with them for who they are and what's going on and understanding their family of origin, understanding their history, and then trying to help them to work on tools and skills in many different ways. So it's outlandish what they're saying. It's equally as outlandish what a lot of YouTubers and people all across the internet are saying. And some of these organizations, you know, the company paid for websites, whether they're clinicians or not, it's abysmal because they've all fallen into the same black hole of I'm just going to follow the masses of this crazy information over here that nobody can prove. So that's why I stand firm with my opinion. Unless they can show otherwise, I don't see a reason to change it. WWD, thank you. I'm trying to see things for what they are and just keep the peace, for my sake, until he goes. Him lingering is allowing me to detach little by little. Well, yeah, keep working on that detachment. That's a positive. And, Wheels, quote, let's shove a bunch of labels on this person. One of them has to be right or maybe not, unquote, psychiatry. Yeah, well, you know, hey, I could perform the kind of science that psychiatry does too by going into my kitchen and cooking a pot of pasta and then deciding that if only so much of it sticks on the wall, it means this thing or the other thing. Or is the pasta that sticks to the wall superior or healthier than the pasta that falls on the stove or the floor? You know, it's people got to think for themselves out there, and people got to take care of themselves. And people with BPD who are disavowing that, denying that, have self-awareness deficits, well, you know, they have to get on the journey. And I would suggest getting on the journey anywhere but in a psychiatrist's office or with a psychiatrist. And I don't mean to say all psychiatrists are horrible, but they're all similarly trained, and then they're all really inculcated that you don't step outside that box. And very few of them ever do, or they have to be nearing retirement to do so, unlike Dr. Peter Bregan and a few others, and Dr. Niall McLaren. Our Life Cure. I have BPD-X. I have a BPD-X. I left because I found out she was cheating for years. I'm so sorry to hear that. It's been a year, and she still tries hard to get together. We share a child, just co-parents. How can I get her to move on? Well, I don't know what you're going to do with her, but you need to move on. So it's really your responsibility to move on and just leave her behind to whatever she's up to. And except for, sharing a child complicates it. But the co-parenting, depending if you have any court orders or not, however that works, you need to have a boundary, number one, that you will not talk to her about anything else on the face of the earth but your child. And so if she says anything about anything else, you just stay quiet, or if it's in a text, you don't answer it. And when it's about the child, you talk about the child. That's a boundary that you need to enact if you haven't already, and stand by, but never announce to your ex. And so you can't get her to move on. You have to erect more boundaries that you enact, and you have to move on. So you can't. I went through this when I was recovering from BPD, and I was living with a quiet BPD, and I wanted her to move on too. And I was set straight in therapy about how I needed to take responsibility for moving on myself. But that's not the only reason I say that. Because you have autonomy over your own choices, but you don't have any control over hers. So you can't get her to move on, but you can help yourself to move on. Even while co-parenting, with strict boundaries and not communicating about anything but your child, no matter what they say. WWD, it may be selfish of me, but it's softening my blow. Thank you so much for your insight. No, I don't think that's selfish of you at all. Anything that helps people, that's what I'm here for. And, well, WWD, you said to Roller Girl to keep believing in herself. And yet, I believe she believes in herself to a degree, but she doesn't believe enough in herself to get them out of there yet. So, that's important too. Deborah, the best mental health is stay off psychiatric medication. Yes, absolutely. I'm 100% for that, and I walk the walk. I walked the walk in the past. I don't just talk the talk. You said try to find a peaceful lifestyle. Yes, well, if somebody with BPD isn't peaceful themselves, they can't find a peaceful lifestyle, but I hear you. Not everyone's the same. Try to figure out your finances, which many with BPD can't do because they're just, they haven't worked, but yeah. And live as simple as possible. Find the things you love. Yes, it's great. And I think that would help lots of people with BPD. But again, not the majority. Well, and I encourage you, Roller Girl, to really believe in yourself. Because that would mean you really walk out of there. Or you get him out of there. And you do what you... But hey, I can't push you. I can't tell you what to do. But that would be a greater degree and depth of knowing yourself and believing in yourself. Deb, in reference to psychiatry view, but in Canada, this is the only avenue some people have for diagnosis. Well, diagnosis, okay, but then walk away from them for the, quote, treatment, unquote. Many cannot afford psychologists. Yeah, but psychiatrist treatment is going to be medications. And otherwise, because they don't treat. And in Canada, you're lucky to get a 20-minute appointment with them, other than for an assessment. So those are called med checkups, right? Med check-ins. And so if you have to go to a shrink to get a diagnosis, yes, but then get out of there and seek treatment elsewhere. So anyway, everybody take care. And with that, I got to go, and I hope something was helpful. And I look forward to next time. And yeah.